It's almost like a party. I mean, we're online waiting to go into this gymnasium to get the shots, and everybody's laughing. And it became like a cultural fun event.
Hi, Peter. How are you?
Hey, Lola,
How's it going?
today's a good day. It's sunny. I live in Mexico. It's sunny. It's nice. Although I could have been, in a hurricane, but I'm not. I'm very happy. Thank you.
In a hurricane.
Yeah, there was a hurricane this year in Acapulco. It was kind of crazy, but I'm
Oh
not
boy.
there. Nope.
Okay, that's good. Well, glad you're good.
Thank you.
So okay, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where do you live? Where are you from?
I am an expat, sometimes a nomad, but mostly an expat. I live in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico, which, according to many magazines, is the best small city in the world, which is, of course, nuts. There is no best small city in the world, but I'm very lucky. And I have a consultancy. I work with advertising agencies around the world, and I do other things because I'm a little ADHD and a little crazy and type A and nuts. But that's my current world.
Great. Okay, well, as you know, so this is our series of our interview series where we're asking people to share their experiences during the pandemic and kind of the aftermath of that pandemic. So where were you when COVID hit, and what do you remember, of those initial stages of the pandemic?
Well, at that time, which was January 2020, and it's, I'm in a month where really most people in the world hadn't heard of COVID. So this is how I found out. I'm on an airplane from New Delhi, India, back to the United States. And again, I had not heard of COVID. And there's a couple on the plane, an American couple wearing masks, serious masks, those serious ones. And I didn't say anything to them on the flight from New Delhi to Canada, which is where we landed. But then we were on the same flight going to Dallas for some reason. So they made the same connection to me. And while I'm in the waiting room in Canada, I go up to them and I said, excuse me, I just have to ask, I'm sorry, why are you wearing masks? And they said, well, there's this new weird problem in China. People are getting sick. People are dying. It's a virus. We don't know what's going on, but we were just in China. People told us, wear masks. And I went, okay, cool. All right, okay. And when I hit on February 1st, 2020, when I got back to Mexico, we started hearing about COVID, and everything went a little bit nuts. We don't remember that, but it was, like, am I going to die?
Yeah, it was a blurry time. Were you, completely quarantined? Did you, were you extremely scared of the virus? And what was that experience like for you?
Well, I know I'm going to make it, or I knew I was going to make it, but it was weird. I'm married. My wife and I stayed at home most of the time. We didn't see our friends. Fortunately, we're in a town in Mexico. I could walk around, at least in the outskirts, and a little bit in what's called Centro, which is downtown. We went through the whole craziness with the supermarkets and the cleaning and the washing and the doing and not breathing and hiding in the corner a little bit, watching lots of Netflix, etc. So yeah, it was something else. Yeah.
So how were the restrictions were pretty strict then in the town in Mexico?
Yeah, I'm lucky. We're again, being in a somewhat of a tourist town, a famous town, San Miguel. There were lots of restrictions. It hurt unfortunately hurt the tourism industry and the people who work in hotels and restaurants. But the town realized that if it was going to survive, it needed to be very aware of what's happening. And they had these like crazy things. When you went into Centro on the 2 or 3 streets that went into the main part of town, they had these booths that you had to walk through that sprayed some sort of liquid on you.
Mystery liquid.
So
I remember that.
it was like mystery liquid. So, and people, I have to say here, obey the law a little bit, and by the way, if you weren't wearing a mask in Centro, the cops stopped you. So it was pretty serious. But I'd walk into town and I'd have to take my glasses off because, I didn't want my glasses to get sprayed. So yeah, it was, it was a little nutso here.
So, you know, what were you doing when the pandemic hit? Did this change your lifestyle at all? I know you had all these projects going. Did you continue those projects?
Well, it didn't change my business because being in Mexico and somewhat nomadish, a lot of my business was done on Zoom already. So I was very used to
Right.
Zoom, but I was really concentrating on my photography, and I was doing photography around the world. I have a series that I was doing. And actually, before that series, I'll just show you, I happen to have a couple of books here. So I did books like this is called Jointlandia, which is a book about, I don't know, let's get it in the camera. It's a book about the marijuana business in the United States. And then another book called Potlandia that I did. So again, you know, being a photographer, but I was working internationally on a series. And after India, I was going to go to Ghana a couple of months later. Well, that got shut down. So unfortunately, while I could still edit my photographs, I wasn't traveling. And what's interesting to me, at least, is I haven't picked up a camera in 3 or 4 years. So I stopped being a photographer.
Wow. So that's, would you say that that is a positive thing or a negative thing since the
Well,
pandemic? Why haven't you picked it up since then?
well, I photograph people. And so for
Mhm.
2 years, that was not an option. And the reason I do photography, and I've been doing it since college on and off, is a way for me to have a reason to travel the world and a reason for me to meet people. So that just shut down. I mean, you know, you couldn't fly places. I couldn't meet people. People didn't want to stand close to me while I was photographing them. You know, it was like, no, sorry, that's doesn't
Yeah.
work in COVID land. So
Yeah.
photography ended, and I kind of shut that down and
Wow.
I'll get back to it, but right now it's shut down.
Wow, that's a big change in the work. And then
Yes.
so what was the vaccine situation like? Because I know that, you know, I grew up in Mexico and so, you know, in the same town. And so I remember I had to go to the United States to get my vaccine before college because it still hadn't come out in Mexico. Were you able to get your vaccine in Mexico?
Well, the first shots that we got in the car and drove. I think it was probably 12 hours from our town in Mexico to Austin, so we could go to the
Mhm.
University of Texas where they were shooting people up. How's that sound? Pretty good. And so that was a hassle, to put it mildly. But
Mhm.
people kind of remember trying to get vaccinated at the beginning. It was not an easy process. But what was funny is when we got back to San Miguel a day later, they had gotten some vaccines, and so whatever we had done that trip, and we did another trip. I don't know, 6, 8, 9 months later to get a second. So um, everything normalized about a year into it in terms of, you know, they figured out what was going on with vaccines here. But, you know, we're as scaredy cat Americans, we trucked up to the USA to get shots.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's funny. Yeah, I think there was also a lot of kind of difficulties in Mexico, the bureaucracy. I think a lot of people, you know, a lot of younger people signed up their parents to
Oh, yeah.
get vaccines who were then skeptical and didn't show up. So a lot of vaccines ended up going to waste, unfortunately.
Yeah, I
But
think that happened in the States too. I remember maybe the last shot I got vaccine, right? I got was I did it in Mexico, and it was almost, Mexicans are just fabulous people. It was almost like a party. I mean, we're online waiting to go into this gymnasium to get the shots, and everybody's laughing, and it became like a cultural fun event, which is a strange thing to say, but you know, yeah, I mean, if you're gonna, you know, enjoy Mexico, go for it. You know, have tequila and get your COVID shots.
drinking tequila to not get COVID. I remember they said if you drink water like frequently, it was like good because then I don't know,
Right,
probably some rumor.
right.
But so did you ever end up getting COVID?
No,
No, never.
no, I'm a good boy.
I got COVID, but it was much later. Not, you know, it was
Right,
in college.
right. Well, I didn't get COVID, but I had a transformation. Again, you know, I couldn't do the photography, so I started writing more. I'd already written a couple of books, but I started writing more. And I wrote and interviewed people for a photography magazine. So that was one thing I did. I did 40 podcast interviews for my business. Of course, you know, you could do it like I'm doing right now, sort of sitting in isolation. And I wrote books. So one of the books here, I'll just show you, since I showed you the other book. This one is not as shiny, so it's easier for the camera. It's How to Build a Kick-Ass Advertising Agency. It's the second book I've written about advertising. But again, I wrote that. I really started the book during COVID when I had, frankly, nothing else to do in respect to, you know, being with other people. So I went
Right.
from photographer to yeah, I'm in COVID. What am I going to do? To actually having output, which was a book and the podcast and some other things. So I would say I survived and I got better. And right now, COVID's kind of over, sort of. And I'm writing a new book about the baby boom generation. So it turned me from a photographer into a writer.
So would you say that's a good thing? Do you know, did you take the pandemic as a positive change on your life, or do you look back and think, how would things be different?
Well, like a lot of people, I was on a roll. So here I did photography in Mexico, in the United States. I went to India. I was going to go to Africa. So that got shut down. So I said that was a pain. That hurt. But I'm into reinvention, which people do when they go to another country. So I just did the reinvention gig, and good or bad, I'm a new, refreshed little baby boy. Here I am.
Good. Well, I'm glad that, you're since developing these projects. Happy
Thank
that
you.
the pandemic could have sparked that for
Right.
you. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story today.
Well, Lola, thank you very much. All right. Take it easy, huh?
Take it easy. Bye.